There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. There's so much to discuss. So I'm going to start off on a somber note and then we can go into the more exciting, fun stuff that I experienced this week. So it is Sunday. Yesterday I got back from Paris, but on Wednesday, I saw Soleil, which is a perfume store based in the UK, shared a post about a new BBC documentary that was released, basically exposing child labour practices in the jasmine harvest for jasmine or Egyptian jasmine extract. And essentially, they revealed that there are 3 big suppliers in Egypt that have the monopoly on the jasmine trade, and they have their own farms, but they also source from independent farmers. And essentially they showed that, especially on private farms, there are children picking the jasmine that is going into your fragrances. But then it kind of also zooms out and exposes the web that actually is part of this entire practice. So the people that pick the jasmine give them to these big monopolies who then will process it and then ship the stuff to the big fragrance brands or whoever your essential oil supplier is. And part of that includes a lot of labor exploitation and also child labor exploitation. So the people who own the big supply houses in Egypt will decide what price they are going to give for a kilo of jasmine. Can you imagine how long it would take you to get a kilo of jasmine? Because this stuff is very light. These little buds and petals are very light, and they're charging, or they're giving the pickers $1 per kilo. And so, of course, if you are a mother or you're a head of a family and you need to feed your family and this is your only skill, you need to pick as much as possible. And because of the cost of living going up everywhere in the world, some families are forced to have the children come and help them pick so that they can actually make enough to feed their families and to survive, which is a very sad reality. And moreover, they're clearly being exploited by these houses who are paying them so little that they have to resort to this. But then you zoom out even further and you think, okay, but who's buying this jasmine? And why are they not making sure that they're ethically sourcing their jasmine? And then you get to the level of the fragrance houses. So most of your favorite fragrances are not made by just a perfumer in a lab somewhere, and most of the brands are not making their fragrances in-house. So Ex Nihilo is not making your perfumes. A lot of brands are just not making your perfumes. They employ fragrance houses, and fragrance houses are essentially these big companies that do research and development for new aroma chemicals, but also source raw materials, and they also have specific palettes of raw materials that they will use in their fragrances. These houses also have in-house perfumers who will construct fragrances based on a client brief, and they also sometimes train perfumers, which we'll get to later because I experienced what this is like recently. And so these big fragrance houses are the ones that are constructing the fragrances, so essentially they're the ones who are choosing what goes into the final perfume product. So then you can think, okay, fine, then we need to blame these big fragrance houses for using these extracts that are derived from child labor. But then it gets even more complicated because a lot of your favorite brands are owned by a big multinational conglomerate. LVMH, Estee Lauder, Puig, who am I missing? L'Oreal. And they're the ones who kind of also dictate, the cost of what the fragrance should be, like how much they are willing to invest in a certain fragrance for a certain house and whatever gets put into them. If they want to market as Egyptian jasmine because it's so exotic, then that's going to be in the final formula. And then you think, okay, fine. Well, then why aren't these big bosses deciding to choose ethical sources? Well, then they were like, well, we do audits. We send the auditors around every year, and then the auditors go and have a look, and they're like, oh, well, when we went, we didn't see evidence of malpractice. We didn't see anything for concern. Or if they did, then they say that we want to improve. We'll put them on an improvement plan, like a PIP for these suppliers. So then the supplier gets to maintain their business, and then these materials are still used in the fragrances that you use. So it's all a very big mess because child labor in Egypt is actually not legal. So then you can think, well, why is the government not enforcing their law? So really, while I saw a lot of pearl clutching on Instagram when people were sharing this, especially when Diet Prada picked up the story, I didn't get frustrated, but I rolled my eyes a little bit, because I don't want to say, oh, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism and then move on. It's just that a lot of people don't really think about where anything comes from. And in this case, this is such a complicated web that is, well, difficult to untangle. It's not impossible. It's hard for you as a consumer and a customer, and even me as somebody who creates content based on this niche. It's hard for me to provide a solution, or for you to take up a solution that's actually going to make a tangible difference. Because I come from a country where agricultural export is a big component of our GDP, and it's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret. It shouldn't be a surprise to you that farm workers are exploited. Farmers are usually some of the richest people in South Africa, but the farm workers live basically in poverty. And that's because people think that taking or picking or processing fruits or vegetables or flowers or raw materials in general is not a high-skilled labor, yet everybody needs these raw materials. And it's difficult to pinpoint what action to take in light of this news, or a remembrance of this news. But I think that the most solid plan that you can enact in your own life is a self-audit. I had multiple people sending me the documentary, and I was just like, I'm online all the time and I've seen this. I also actually shared this post as well. I shared an earlier post than what you're sending me. I wasn't annoyed, but I was just saying, like, why, like, I've seen this. But I hope you can't hear the church bells in the background. It's so annoying living in a Christian country. It's so annoying, especially when they don't actually have Christian values. Anyway, that's a different story. I don't think, so people are calling for boycotts, and people are calling for no accountability to be taken. And I think in this case, there's only so much stakeholders like the perfume houses or the big brands like the LVMH and stuff. I feel like you should avoid those products in general, because they do not have good business practices. I don't think it's necessary to be part of a conglomerate to have a brand, and they're just icky to me. But choosing to divest or boycott in this case is not going to bring about tangible results, because when you are a developing country where the richness and the wealth of your country comes from the soil, what you can grow and what you can extract, the minute people divest from a certain thing, it's literal food being taken out of people's mouths. Child labor is abhorrent, but those families are resorting to it because they need to eat. So I do not know and it's not my job to know what the solution is, but we have to keep in mind all the different components and elements that are here. But this is also another time where I talk about, self-auditing. You need to really think about, what are you doing in your life that aligns with your principles? If you are shocked and dismayed by child labor practices, where are you shopping? Are you still buying fast fashion regularly? Are you still buying Nespresso and Nescafe capsules for your coffee machine? Are you still buying Starbucks? Are you still buying non-fair trade coffee and chocolate? Are you still buying chocolate as a whole? It's not very good in terms of labor practices, in terms of resource usage for the earth. It's very, very sad. But this is the truth about living in a globalized world, a modern globalized world, is that your purchasing power is also directly linked to some level of exploitation somewhere, and there are better choices to make, and sometimes you have to sacrifice things in order to make those choices. And unfortunately, these sacrifices are going to be uncomfortable. So it's going to mean that maybe you need to wait 2 months before you can buy a new dress, because the dress that you want to have is very expensive, because they actually pay their garment workers a livable wage. Maybe it means that your baby doesn't need brand new clothes every time they outgrow their stuff from a fast fashion company. Maybe it means that you go shop secondhand because babies are born all the time and parents have to give away the clothes that their babies outgrow all the time. So maybe you can just buy secondhand. I mean, there's always a solution that you can do, but I feel like often the online response is just this shock and dismay and this anger, but we don't actually think back and look on ourselves about how we can live better lives so that we promote brands that are doing it in a better way compared to others. And I don't want to be on a soapbox on this one because I'm not a perfect being. I don't always check the proper label. And up until a few months ago, I was still drinking Coca-Cola, even though they do terrible things around the world. And also I'm trying to avoid Nestle products as much as possible, but they're also everywhere. And it's very true that to avoid these big conglomerate monopoly products, you have to pay more. And it's tough. I understand it's tough, but I think that a more constructive response to information that, like what was given in this documentary, is trying to practically live in a way that aligns with your morals in your own life rather than just exhibiting online dismay. Although, now this is another thing that happened last week, it is, I believe, that the founder and CEO of BDK once again rallied his support behind Israel. And I don't know how YouTube deals with content around this subject, but two brave creators, I will say, kind of screenshotted what was said and shared it onto their stories and said, I can't believe that people are still backing this man and backing this brand. And that's another way you can, no matter what you believe about the political situation, you either care about human life or you don't. And even if you haven't sat down and really thought deeply about the situation and you haven't educated yourself around the history of it, everybody has seen what's been going on for the past 8 months. 8 months is a terribly long time to be watching people die online. And so for somebody who's a founder of a brand to just say that so flippantly, as though real people have not been suffering in this scourge, as though real people are trying to get their loved ones back from the hostage situation, is insane to me. So I'm not telling you to boycott BDK. I'm just saying either that brand aligns with your morals or it does not. And I think it's very funny. I figured that they took a little bit of a hit from the first time he said something, because then they suddenly started sending out PR for the first time. I also know that they opened up their first flagship in Paris, so maybe that they needed to get their numbers up. But I would hate to be an investor in that brand right now, because he's just took his brand value and just kind of set it downwards. Or maybe not. We don't really know the morality of people who are playing the money game. But I just feel like if a collective of people who have the power to make you go viral are not in your corner, maybe it's not going to be as easy to be a viable business. But as again, a lot of people don't care about this. So I wouldn't expect maybe much to change. So we'll just see what happens in the long run. And unfortunately, in the world, we see that most of the time, business comes before anything else. Even if brands want to be ethical or businesses want to be ethical and want to have an ethical business model, sometimes they just have to make the better deal that suits the bottom line. And the bottom line is always making money. And we circle back to the point that there's what? No ethical consumption under capitalism. So yes, my message is horrible news. I will link the documentary in my caption if you've not seen it. But at the end of the day, don't clutch your pearls. Do something tangible with what you can, with what you have. Okay, that was like a not so nice thing to see, but I think it was important to see that none of our purchases are without victims in some way. And I mean, this goes from animal to plant agriculture to perfume, anything that is grown and extracted from the earth. Your cell phones, your laptops, everything has a human cost behind it. So I really believe in mindful consumption for the most part. Because, you know, should I go into this little rant? Maybe I'm not. Should I? I'm gonna do a little bit of the rant. I just think it's funny how a lot of people don't care about their impact on the earth and on the world, but their actions are contributing to a deterioration of standards of living and also the environment, and then they go have children. And now you just had children so that you can say you're a mom or you're a parent, and then down the line it's your child that's going to have to live with the consequences of the decisions that you participated in and that you made, the systems that you voted for with your money. Okay, that's what I'll say about that. But it really incenses me because you're eventually going to be gone, and your children are the ones that are going to suffer for the world that you left behind. And I just want everybody to be more mindful and also think more community minded, because a person is a person, and we're all flawed and we're all horrible, but we're all beautiful and lovely and kind and have dreams and have aspirations. We all deserve to live. And so I just think that whatever principles you think should be valid that impact other people's lives, you're also voting for that to be valid and impact your life in that same way. Because sometimes you just win a lottery and you get born into a good situation. Sometimes you get born into a bad situation and you can't get out of it. And sometimes you can crawl your way out. But either way, everybody is voting for how society should be structured. And we can just be voting better. Okay, I will now step off the soapbox. But imagine my surprise in seeing this documentary being released on, I think it was Wednesday. Me knowing that the next day I'm going onto a train to Paris to go and spend a day with one of the big fragrance houses and go to perfumery school. I went to perfumery school and I made a perfume. So, I mean, I won't lie, I did take a few minutes to think whether I should actually just withdraw from the invitation I'd already said yes to and paid my train for and paid my hotel for. But in the end, I thought, whoever gets to do this, who's a layperson? Brands get to do this, get to play around with aroma chemicals and perfumes in terms of smelling different modifications and smelling the raw materials that the perfumer suggests. But nobody gets to see the behind the scenes like this. So I thought I'm gonna bank this one for the memoir at some point. It's still very crazy to me that this is part of my life. And I'm so incredibly grateful. And I'm also going to stop here to remind you that you don't have to have a huge following. You don't have to be the most viral. You don't have to be the most relevant account on social media to get access to things that are incredible like this. Because ultimately, you just need to create in a way that people can connect to. I don't know who the person is who's there that was like, oh yeah, we need her. She needs to be part of this. She needs to see this. But I'm so incredibly grateful to have experienced this. It was, honestly, it's one of the best days of my year so far. And I've had incredible days this year, but this was one of the best days of my year. And I'll tell you exactly all about it. First of all, General French A and B, and living in Paris for 2 years alongside reading French Vogue for fun has done me so well because I comprehend a lot of French. Because this entire day was in French and speaking for me was a struggle, so I need to figure out a way to be more conversational with French so I can improve my spoken word, but at least I can comprehend. And it was such a beautiful day. Essentially, it was a content creator day where we were invited to go to the Givaudan School of Perfumery. So Givaudan is a major fragrance house, like I said. They're the ones that invent new materials, have certain raw material extracts, create perfumes for brands, and also train perfumers and also host some of the major perfumers. And some of your best and favorite ones work as Givaudan. Quentin Biche is a Givaudan perfumer. Khalees Becker is a Givaudan perfumer. She made Love Don't Be Shy, you know, Rihanna's rumored signature scent. In fact, Khalees Becker is the director of the School of Perfumery. And so we all met up, some of us met up at the Givaudan headquarters in the 16th arrondissement near the Arc de Triomphe. If you saw my Au Parfumerie event from 2 years ago, it's pinned on my TikTok. That's essentially where we met up. And then we took about half an hour, 40-minute drive to this nearby town where the Givaudan School of Perfumery is, alongside the headquarters for their, what do they call it? I suppose it's functional fragrance development. So there they would be making fragrances for your candles, your hair stuff, your shampoo, your conditioner, anything that is not a fine fragrance for the body, they make it there. And there they also have this garden. Okay, I need to be more structured in relaying the story. So we took the train there, then we arrived, or the van there, and we arrived and we had a breakfast and we met up with each other. So there were a lot of content creators, francophone ones from Paris, and one was from Geneva and one was from London, but she is French. You might know her, Clémence, CC Fragrance. And we kind of roamed around the headquarters and the offices of the Perfume School, which also used to be the offices for major perfumers. And so the School of Perfumery used to be in Grasse, and then the campus moved to Argenteuil, which is the little town we were in 2008. And as you walk in, there is a wall that has a little painting of a master perfumer and their groundbreaking or breakthrough product that they're associated with. So you start off with people like, just so many of the greats. Jean-Carl, a whole lot of people. Like Givaudan was involved in a lot of things that were quite iconic, like the Dove soap bar, the Lux soap bar, the Nivea cream, things like that. And so you have all of these like Hall of Famers walking up into the offices, and then you get into kind of a lobby area and there are offices everywhere, and then there's a meeting room with also the desks of the student perfumers, and then there's also a little lab with an organ. And we first got an introduction by Khalees to some of the little elements. They have this little wall full of raw materials in their whole form, and then also in a kind of diluted form. And I smelled some raw materials which was surprising to smell in the raw form. Like Castoreum is like less funky than you would imagine. It actually smelled quite medicinal. And maybe it's the way it was dried. I thought that was really interesting. And also vanilla, raw vanilla, or at least in the extract form, is also quite animalic in a way. It's very funky. So scents like Tahitian Vanilla by Paris Monte Carlo, or Vanille de Tahiti by Paris Monte Carlo, are quite true to the form of raw vanilla. And then she introduced us to a testing station. So the students, throughout their tenure of the school, or les élèves, as they put it, they have to memorize up to 600 raw materials. So if they were to be given a blotter with a raw material on it, they should be able to tell you straight up, oh, this is Javanol or whatever. And then they are tested twice a day, and there's like this AI system where they're told to fetch a certain item from a certain position, and then they have to smell it and then say what it is, and then they have to put it back in a different place, so you don't have this association with position and the ingredient. They try and mix it up in a way that you really are forced to integrate these things very clearly and very carefully into your mind, because apparently your sensory or your olfactive memory is quite transient. So you can smell something and it like your brain will hold on to its scent if it's very transient for 5 seconds, and then it won't be something you can easily recall. So when we have our scent associated memories, it's usually because we probably were doing something else that allowed us to associate the scent with that place, and that's why it's such a strong memory for us. But it makes sense to me though, because there are so many different molecules that have aromatic properties that surround us all the time, that your brain has to prioritize the important ones. And I think that this is because, I'm thinking from like an evolutionary point of view, you should be able to smell something that is unusual and then go and, so that you are warned for danger. So for instance, if suddenly you're smelling smoke, oh, something's on fire, I need to wake up and do something, versus if you always smell smoke, it probably wouldn't register as much for you because your brain says this is a normal smell. And I think this is also how people get nose blind to fragrances. So anyway, that alone really reaffirmed my position on not wanting to be a perfumer. Although I will say that most of the reason why I don't want to be a perfumer is because I just want to wear perfume at least every single day, twice a day, my day scent and my bedtime scent. So that's why I don't want to live a fragrance-free life outside of my work. So then she also introduced us to Carto again, which I'd seen before at their headquarters in Paris. And this is essentially an AI system that really allows an expansion of the perfumer's palette, and also a harmonization of ingredients. So there's a lot of knowledge that these people have to know. And while this Carto AI really helps, it also makes things more simple. So for instance, you need to know how much of a stemone to use alongside a coconut lactone to make a fig note, right? But moreover, you need to understand how potent that raw material is by itself. So you need to be able to use it in the correct proportion. And Carto kind of allows that kind of harmonization of different materials if you want to do something. And Khalees demonstrated this to us with making a fig. And she also made a really beautiful lily of the valley, a muguet. When I smelled it, I was like, can we have this as a perfume? And that one really made me realize, first of all, how many elements go into creating just one note that we think is just a single note, but is actually a whole lot of different things. And then it also allowed me to see how this kind of tool could be useful, because a lot of time, perfumers in the past had to spend a lot of time tinkering. Right, so if you were trying to build a rose and then you put too much of this and too little of that, then you had to keep adjusting and adjusting and adjusting. So Carto really allows them to spend more time in the ideation phase rather than the mechanical tinkering, because you need to make sure you're balancing things correctly, although they do learn how to do that properly. And that was a really interesting thing to see and to note. So after we got to see Carto, we were introduced to the student perfumers in different years. Let me tell you something. You have to put respect on these people's names, because perfumery is not an easy industry to get into if you're trying to take the formal route. So at Givaudan, there are two ways you can get into the perfume school. You need to either have spent years as a evaluator, or you need to have gone through perfume school or done a master's in perfumery at places like ISIPCA. The number of students in each year is tiny. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 4, but there are not a lot of positions to get into the perfume school itself. But of course, the perfumery schools take lots of people in, and there's so many different perfume schools all around France alone, and some classes have 20, 40 students, and they're all fighting for maybe a total of 20 positions in the major fragrance houses. So you have to put respect on the names of every single person who was in that room. And then once we got paired up with people, we then got into the garden. I got paired up with a evaluator now in perfume school called Phil, who's an American. And that's also what was really cool at Givaudan. They really are trying to promote diversity. And obviously Khalees is a woman in this position, and it's very clear in the perfume industry, women are not very well represented in terms of the biggest master perfumers, but also just the most celebrated perfumers, much like in cooking and many other industries. So they're trying to promote as much diversity as possible, but at the same time, there also is a standard to uphold. And this is when I saw what the role of director really is quite daunting, because essentially Khalees Becker, who's also working as a perfumer at the same time, is picking the stars of the future. She's picking the next Jean Carles, the next Dominique Ropion, the next Jean-Claude Helena. That's kind of her job, is to recognize talent in people and to see whether or not she can nurture that talent. And nurturing that talent is using this method that was invented by Jean Carles, one of like the major perfumers who kind of formalized fragrance education way back when. He developed a method, and this is where the entire notion of learning your ingredients comes in, where you have to be able to distinguish one kind of rose cultivar from another. You have to be able to really know your materials well. So when you're trying to build something, you know exactly what to reach for. You're not trying to see what's available to make. And it makes sense kind of to do it in that kind of Socratic way. And so this is kind of the standard of education that's employed for most of the formal perfume schooling in this day. And I think it's really interesting and fascinating. And what is really inspiring for me, and I got the first notion of this when I heard Khalees speak at Aix-en-Provence this year, is she's very well-rounded in terms of what she reaches for inspiration to use in her work. She really studies didactically what certain elements are. Like, what is talent? What makes a good student? Is it better to go for somebody who's inherently talented or somebody who's going to work hard? And then also going into how to view the job as a perfumer in the space of fragrance. Like, this is not, you can't really call it an artist if they are trying to compose something based on the will and desire of somebody else. It's more like the role of a musician. You have to understand your notes and how to harmonize them in new and interesting ways. And then, I mean, it's not only the perfumer's job alone, but also make that harmony into something that will be mellifluous to other ears or very interesting to other people's ears. So I really had a huge respect. You can see that she's one of these polymath kind of people who has a reference and a notion of many different disciplines, and she integrates them into her personal philosophy and the way that she goes about being a teacher and mentor and trying to cultivate this next generation of greats. Okay, so after meeting our paired up perfumer, we went into the Givaudan garden. This is a really beautiful place because they've essentially grown everything that you would use, well, not everything, but grown a lot of the raw material that you would reference in a perfume. So the different roses, the damask rose, there's a Jean Carles rose, there's the rose centifolia, there's so many different things, also like a gardenia, freesia, tuberose. Unfortunately, the tuberoses weren't in bloom when we arrived, nor the jasmine, but they were all there. And also different plants I'd never seen before, like Mexican orange blossom, which isn't actually an orange blossom, but it has like this sharp green note. And what is really cool with Phil is that he kind of had a really wholesome, holistic way of going through the garden with me, where he would encourage me to smell something and then describe what I'm smelling. But not just saying, oh, I'm smelling a rose, but like, what is part of this rose? And then you could really start picking out the nuances of, oh, this rose is more fruity, or there's a bit more spiciness. I can feel a soapiness here. Or here it's very rich and what I would say classically rosy, or this is a boring rose, I said. And gardenias in real life smell amazing, by the way. They're so buttery and a little bit spicy, and obviously typically white floral as well. Gardenia is the white flower that I think is underused in perfumery right now. I'm going to say that right now. Use more gardenia, please. And also there was vetiver, patchouli, pineapple sage. And I was like, this is Creta ventus in a leaf. And there's also a tasting garden, so the herbs and edible plants that you can also use in perfumery and other applications. And then they also had a beauty garden where one could derive natural extracts to use in beauty products, which is obviously more relevant for their fine functional fragrance and functional material departments. And after going through the garden and smelling a lot of things, I also smelled patchouli for the first time in real life, which was incredible. The plants were drying a little bit, but I actually think I still have some in my blazer somewhere. Anyway, it was really cool. And also real vetiver. It was just smelling the raw materials in the glass bottles and then smelling the real thing in real life and being forced to really take in what you're smelling was such a interesting experience. And more so, I found with Phil, he was seeing the world in such a different way. He was seeing and sensing in terms of molecules, because I could only use references based on what my everyday lexicon is. And then he would say, oh yes, that's the excanol and the la 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 la, that's be responsible for that material. And of course, he has that sensibility because they have to go into the garden and then pick up a specific kind of rose and then recreate it and then get critiqued on it. And in fact, they do like group blind critiquing where they will number their little extracts of their compositions and then swap them around, and everybody critiques it as if it's their own and says what needs to be added, what needs to be removed. And this is how they really master and polish their craft. I love this level of artisanal focus and mastery, and this is something that I think is becoming more of a lost art on one hand, once again, because of capitalism, and we have to choose vocations where we just have to do what we need to do to get ourselves fed. You do something strange for a piece of change. And there's also a less appreciation for it because we're such a easy come, easy go, instant gratification society. We could have beautiful lace curtains giving us shade in our bedrooms, but those take quite a while to make because they're handmade, and also they're going to be quite expensive. So we again go for the cheap, fast option, and it's not necessarily as pleasant and pleasing, and it doesn't celebrate the craft and artisanship and mastery that goes into these kinds of things. Anyway, I just really respect perfumers after this experience. I already did, but I respect them even more. And then we had a beautiful lunch, and we got to sit and chat. Ashley was there. Ashley in Paris, you might know her on TikTok and YouTube. And I just got to chat with a lot of people, and Khalees Becker was literally sitting right there, and I spoke to Nadia Gaykin Firenze, who just released a perfume line, and she was also talking about her trip to Cape Town, and I was talking about my experiences, and it was just a fun, wholesome time. And also the French people were so patient with my bad French and so friendly, and this is why I feel like any person who's got something bad to say about the French was exhibiting some bad behavior themselves, because they are actually a good people. And I'm not saying this because I'm the surviving plane, like in that meme, but I lived there for 2 years, and I found them to be in general very agreeable people and very friendly and courteous. And you just have to, I think you have to have a certain tolerance for frankness, I think that's one thing that is very true about French people. They can be very frank and blunt and short or curt, and that's something you just have to accept. And then if you can go over that and, get your ego out the way, you will have a very pleasant time. And it was such what a French lunch as well. We had a glass of wine with it, and then there was fruit and desserts, and it was very lovely. But the time in the afternoon was my favorite part, because we got to go and sit at the desks of each perfumer we'd been paired with, or student perfumer, and we got given this smelling kit, and inside the smelling kit were rows and rows and rows of raw materials, synthetic and natural, that we got to sniff through. And then there were also, I think, about 5 bases, which were kind of pre-constructed fragrances that essentially we were going to modify and turn into our own unique scent. So what we did, Phil and I, we kind of went through each material, and he's been in this school for 7 months. He already had such a knowledge of each material, and going through each material and ingredient, you really could pick up like what role it would serve in a fragrance, in a olfactive pyramid. And so many things smell more different than you would expect. For instance, you know how practically every commercial fragrance has heroin in it, which is derived from jasmine. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to be very sensual and get people attracted to you. I found on a piece of paper to be not as like big and bold as you'd expect. It's actually quite subtle, but then when you put it away from you, you can actually smell the sillage, and I'm like, okay, I know exactly what that is. I've smelled this so many times in perfumes. And then you just go through the different materials, and it was so cool. Obviously, we didn't smell every single material that exists on earth, but we went through the citruses, and you got to smell the nuances between a bergamot versus a lemon versus an orange. And first of all, bergamot is the superior citrus in my opinion. I didn't get to smell a mandarin, but I really loved it. And then we also got to go through some synthetics that also have very interesting properties. Like sometimes there were things that I smelled and I was like, oh, this feels like the end of what I would say is an orange blossom. Or this feels like the beginning of what I would say is a this note. And that was also what was really amazing with Phil, is that every time we smelled something, he asked me what I'm smelling and to describe what I'm smelling. And that really allowed me to deeply appreciate what was before me, and then start playing around with elements put together to eventually create my fragrance. This is Schutz, the most rare fragrance in my collection because only me and Phil have this. I've got the most of it, but he has a little bit of a sample as a memory, and I also have the first rendition, which also is equally as good, I will say. But both of them have different properties. I'm wearing Premier Schutz, which is what I called it, or the first mod, as my scent of the day today. So if you want, we can go through it. I can tell you exactly what I put inside it. Maybe I shouldn't. Am I giving away fragrance secrets? Should you know about this? No, actually, technically the base formulas that they had pre-mixed for us, we don't know what's in there, so you wouldn't be able to recreate this, most likely. And I also even know how I would improve it. So, Schutz, or Schatzi, it's actually called Schatzi, means treasure. It's as a nickname in German, and that's what my grandmother used to call my sister when we were growing up. And I just wanted to treasure the day, and I wanted a cute name, so I chose Schatzi. The other alternative was going to be Argenteuil sous la pluie. And as you can see, I'm struggling to say that. So Schatzi is a much better name. One of the base I was choosing or opting for was either a very fruity tropical base that was very sweet and fruity and felt red to me, versus this one called Bois Blanc, which it means white wood and is quite creamy wood. Like I thought, this is a sandalwood base, and so I thought I could play with that one instead because it was very forgiving. But there also was like a chypre one. There was also a kind of citrusy cologne vibe as well, and there was a lily of the valley one, and all of those were very pretty, but I just wanted to be able to play around more. I felt more restricted by the other ones because I felt like they were already quite complete. Well, Bois Blanc was also quite complete, but I thought I could do more to play around with it. And in the end, I do have still quite a subtle fragrance, but it is still something I'm very proud of and very proud of wearing. And this is a clean, iris-forward, woody fragrance with top notes of pink pepper and ginger, a creamy iris heart, and a base of soft woods, and a touch of cotton candy. So I did put a little bit of ethyl maltol in here, and In the dry down of the first edition, it's like very prominent, so it feels like I've just made a Baccarat clone. But in the second rendition, we toned down the amount of the base formula we added, and we toned everything else up. So this one dries down into kind of a woody, papery iris. It has a little bit of the sweetness, but it's also very sparkling because of the ginger, because I upped the ginger. I said we need more ginger. And also has a very good dose of pink pepper as well. So I love that. And it was so fun. I would love just to have a kit of pre-diluted raw materials that I can tinker with and make little perfumes with. Like this might become a hobby of mine I might invest in. So yes, that's my fragrance. And I'm going to make a sample for my sister and for my friend. And that's it. I have less than 10 ml of the stuff because I've been wearing it. Because, now let me tell you something. Nothing justifies you more than a fragrance compliment, right? I wore this to dinner because I met up with my friend in Paris when I got back. And when I was waiting for my friend in the restaurant, the waitress, after I took my jacket off, said, "You smell amazing." I said, "Merci." She didn't ask what I was wearing, but she said I smelled great. So, premier shots and shots are a hit. But we should also talk about other things I smelled in Paris, because that's essentially the end of the Givaudan story. I made the fragrance, we had chit chats with people, and it was just a beautiful day. And I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful to Givaudan and to you guys who watch my content and comment, and to the people who are secretly very influential, who are out there and pulling strings for me, unbeknownst to me. It's just really incredible to be in a position to be able to experience things like this, and to see these behind the scenes, and to have these stories to tell. I still cannot believe it. It was so fun, so exciting. I'm going to make a reel about it probably, and also post it on TikTok, but you got the full story. I'm going to make a polished, edited little mini vlog, but you got the full story here on the Sniff session. Thank you for tuning in. Okay. Oh, yes. So Ashley Santiago is a perfumer, Mexican-American perfumer, junior perfumer now at Givaudan. She went through the perfume school. She also did a master's in perfumery. And what is really exciting about her cohort is that at the end, they had a final project or something, and everything was bought by Liquide Imaginaires. And you might have seen on my TikTok or around, they had an installation in Milan Design Week called the Imaginarium. And there they had essentially these citrus forward fragrances with these beaded citruses around in this beautiful garden. And yeah, these were all created by the cohort of the Givaudan School of Perfumery. They bought all of those. And so yeah, that is all I can say about that. But I got to smell them. So Ashley really quickly showed me some samples, and these are excellent. The perfume school creates excellent perfumers because they're all so beautifully balanced and so finished and professional. So the one that Ashley made was called Lime Sister. And what I smelled was a lime with a little bit of the sharpness taken away, and she merged it with mimosa. So that honeyed, powdery mimosa comes into play with the lime, and you just have this beautiful, I would say unique, kind of a reinvention of a linden blossom even. And it's so stunning. And you know me, I'm not a citrus wearer, but all of these were excellent. Then the other one that Ashley almost collaborated with was one called Saffron Mandarin, or Mandarin Saffron. I need to get my hands on that. So you know how often saffron is used in a way that the saffron is deep and leathery and almost sharp and sometimes metallic. Here the saffron is just at that top bit that you get, like the real nod to the spice. It almost felt vegetal, and then paired with the sweet mandarin was just perfect. Stunning. And then there was another pistachio one that was quite interesting, that almost smelt toasted. And then there was one that was gourmand-like, that was really delicious. And yeah, they did an excellent job. I hope that at some point we can purchase these because they're excellent fragrances. And that was just a beautiful way to end off the day, to see that, well, I saw the perfume students and I saw how knowledgeable they were and lovely, and what an interesting dynamic and collaborative environment they were in. At the end of the day, apart from the cool schooling environment they have, they actually come out highly competent and capable. So, 10 thumbs up to the Givaudan School of Perfumery. Of course, this is the only one I've been to and seen, so I don't have any reference other than that, but I was thoroughly impressed with the day, extremely grateful, and thoroughly impressed by the scents. So even though I couldn't make it to Milan came to me, and I was really excited to smell those things. Apart from that, I did spend some time in Paris, very briefly, because I had an early train to get back, because I have to be back to my regular life. With grey skies, hard to do, but I went and smelled a few things in Paris. The first thing I smelled was Histoires de Parfums, not a blue bottle 1.7. This is their new creation. Now, first of all, this thing is what my apartment smells like. This little sprayer. I also love how everybody's copying Maison Crivelli now. Anyway, so they have one of these magic appearing blotters where there's going to be an image when you spray on it, and this starts off as a suntan lotion fragrance, like a typical Soleil Blanc, and you know me, these things are not exciting to me, but there's just something in there. I think there is an animalic edge to it, and the reason why I sought this out, because I'm not majorly interested in Histoires de Parfums, but Fred, or Perfumology on TikTok and Instagram, told me that he thinks that they added some oud in here. And so I went to check it out, and I agree. It makes it far more interesting, although I think that it would make people less... I think it would be less of an easy reach if people wore it for a longer time. But this is an interesting thing. But the Not a Blue Bottle series, I appreciate for being really easy to wear and easy to understand, but still quality high perfumery. And then, of course, I had to stop by the Infiniment Coty exhibit, or the shop actually in Paris. So Coty is a big brand, a big beauty brand. They own a different beauty brands, but it was started out by the perfumer Coty, who invented the chypre. And they first used to sell different fragrances, and then they got into beauty, and in celebration of 120 years of Coty, they created this collection of 14 fragrances. First of all, 14 fragrances to be released at the same time is a little bit cuckoo bananas. If we're honest, it's a bit cuckoo bananas, but respect the hustle, respect the game. And I did tell them that it's very funny that you guys don't have a discovery set, because there's not a lot of points of sale, physical points of sale, so people cannot try this stuff. So how do you expect them to buy them blindly, especially in a market where there's so many fragrances? In the end, I would say that they have a very solid collection, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, but they do. And one of the highlights for me was their Orange Blossom, which is inspired by, of course, it's going to be mornings in Morocco and North Africa, right? Because that's where the orange blossom tree is quite prominent. And it's a beautiful orange blossom. And their invention of this molecular aura that supposedly extends longevity and flattens the olfactive pyramid, I'm not really seeing its effect much, but maybe it's supposed to be more subtle. But I wouldn't say that there are standout fragrances in it. I would just say that they have solid fragrances in traditional categories. And I smelled the vanilla Encore Une Fois. It's good. It's a high quality vanilla. I first said it wasn't too sweet on my TikTok, but I'm so sorry. It actually is very sweet. After wearing it for a couple of hours when I sprayed it on my arm, I just realized there was something sweet catching at the back of my throat, and the sweetness was that vanilla fragrance. So it's actually very sweet, and it's also very strong. And the Orange Blossom is really beautiful and fluffy, and both of them though have this clean undertone. It might be the molecular aura, but there's this white musk element I detect in both of them. that it doesn't feel like it doesn't belong, but it's definitely noticeable to me. But of course, I've recently been trained to smell deeply, so maybe that's why I figured it so much. And apart from that, I went to Chanel to smell the new fragrance because it's supposed to be an iris. Unfortunately, it is beautiful, but we don't buy Chanel here. And also I smelled Chanel Sycamore, which is this gorgeous vetiver. It's got that nuttiness that I love. But there are other brands that make nutty vetivers, so I will invest there. Actually, that's my current mission. I'm looking for a good vetiver fragrance that I enjoy, apart from Capua by Electabus. That I'm going to buy at some point. Okay, so we can move on, I suppose, to the sample set of the week. I probably have been speaking for a very long time, and so I thank you for staying tuned. I had to just check the time there. Fun fact, when I film, I I don't put my contact lenses in, and I'm not wearing my glasses, so I'm just blind because I'm trying not to look at the screen too much and just look at you. But a while ago, I went to a Goldfield Banks cocktail party, and they were going through this series, botanical series. They were launching the new Silky Woods Elixir. And I've smelled through this sample set, and I have to say, I didn't really have much of an opinion of Goldfield Banks before. I'd smelled a few things, Desert Rosewood, Island Lush. I smelled Island Lush. I was not impressed by that. So I kind of had disregarded this brand, much to my shame, because this botanical series is excellent. It's just, to me, it's indicative of exemplary storytelling in terms of choosing materials that are relevant to Australia and the Australian ecosystem, and also just choosing and creating fragrances that I would say are not easily mass appealing or easily knowable and likable. And there are 4 fragrances in this botanical collection. One, of course, would be the original Silky Woods. Then there is Purple Suede. And then there's also Island Lush. And then there's also, of course, the Silky Wood Elixir. I also know that they're launching something soon, or at some point, that is very Oris dominant. And that scent was excellent. And I can't wait for it to come out. But who knows when that'll be. So first, let's talk about Island Lush. This is something I also came out with a full bottle of. I had not been so impressed by something like that in a long time. Now, although I love fragrance, so I smell widely, I had not been really enamored with many fragrances that are more masculine coded. Island Lush is a leathery sandalwood Oris fragrance. It's powerful. I think it's deeply, I hate using this word, but sexy. It makes me feel so confident. It's silky, it's smooth. It's just so excellently crafted. Now, leather notes can often become quite jarring because leather can have this sharpness to it, but here it's so well balanced with the softer, creamier elements of the sandalwood and the Oris that it's just a beautifully crafted fragrance. I cannot help but enjoy this one. Unfortunately, as the weather warms up, I'm wearing it less, but it's just excellent, 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 excellent. I also have here Silky Woods. I'm not gonna lie. When I first smelled Silky Woods, I thought that the hype was overrated. And then I smelled it again, and then I realized that the reason why I was underwhelmed by it is because this is a vanilla fragrance. It's not a Silky Wood fragrance. The name is a lie. And honestly, this is a good vanilla fragrance. I'm not going to lie. But honestly, this to me is not too many jumps away from Vanilla 28 by Kayali. Yeah, I said it. Sue me. I said, I'm going to say it. I'm going to tell you the truth each time. It's not too far away from that scent to me. Then we've got Purple Suede. And this one didn't wow me as much because this is a leather scent that I find jarring. But I think that it's also just good quality. So you can't really complain too much. I think that a lot of people would be less into this fragrance because of the deep leatheriness. This is probably more masculine coded, but it's also quite minimally dimensional. There's a vegetal facet, of course, but yeah, it could be better. It's not the best, but I still am really content with the series because it is high quality perfumery. Now, Silky Woods Elixir, this is something special because this is like deeper and denser and to me more interesting. This to me is more evocative of Silky Woods. I understand why there is a prominent vanilla in here because this would be overwhelming to just have the leathery, woody and saffron aspects alone. But this is a solid fragrance. I think of the botanical series, I would say that my favorite is Island Lush and then a very close second is Silky Woods Elixir. So this is something I would highly recommend you check out. I think that in this day and age where there's a lot of fine fragrance, I think that it's good to search for things that are missing in your collection. Like, it's okay to love a certain note, but do you really need every iteration of that? And I would seek out brands like Goldfield and Banks to find that one special thing that you didn't know you were looking for, or maybe you're looking for something that is just well done. I also think the packaging is pretty decent. In this particular collection, I prefer it. Of course, I do. It's very shiny, all gold. So who wouldn't like that? But yeah, solid brand, solid scents, solid collection. And so I think we've yapped a lot today. Is there anything else I want to say to you? Something to remind you about? No. Be mindful of your consumption. Smell good things. And vote wisely with your dollar. Always sample before you buy. And of course, happy sniffing.